welcome back to my channel. I'm back this week with another video for you guys. But today we're going to be doing a little battle of the eyeshadow palette. We're going to be comparing the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette with this Wet n Wild Rose in the Air palette. And yeah, we're going to be putting these on the eye. We're going to be seeing how they blend, how they perform. I'm going to be showing you guys swatches as well as a little wear test to see which eyeshadows wear the longest. So if you're interested in watching that, definitely keep on watching. But if you're not a part of the BADGal family yet, don't forget to subscribe to my channel before you leave. And yeah, let's get into this battle of the eyeshadow palettes. So as always, let's get on with the facts. As I said before, we're gonna be comparing Modern Renaissance to the Wet n Wild eyeshadow palette. I'm gonna first go over the facts on the Wet n Wild palette. This is the Color Icon eyeshadow 10 pan palette. This is the Rosé in the Air, and you get 10 colors, and it is $4.99. And this one over here is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette, and on this one you get 14 eyeshadows, and this one is $42. And the good thing about this one is that it has a mirror, and you also get a brush, which are some things that you do not get with this one. You do not get a mirror or a brush with this one, but keep in mind that this one is $4.99, so you are paying a lot less for this palette with Wet n Wild. As you can tell, this is an up-close look of the Wet n Wild eyeshadow palette. As you can see, the colors on this palette are very similar to the Modern Renaissance colors. And on this palette, on the back, there's some instructions to tell you guys more of how to create a look with the palette. And these shades are pretty much classified in numbers, not in names. So those are the numbers of the shades that are on this palette. Now this right here is the Modern Renaissance palette. It is of course a classic, and those are the colors on this one, and that is what it looks like up close. As you guys know, I love this palette. It is definitely a holy grail for me. And this is what the colors look like side by side. As you can tell, the colors are very similar, which is why I really wanted to try these out and see which one is better and if they're actually dupes. Alright guys, so now that I really showed you an up-close look of both of the palettes and how they look like side by side, I'm gonna be swatching both of the palettes and showing you guys how they swatch. I do have to say, keep in mind that swatches don't really tell you how an eyeshadow performs. You do have to see that on the eye, but I'm still gonna swatch them because I feel like swatches still tell you a little bit about the pigmentation of the shadow. And yeah, let's get to swatching. So I don't know if you can tell right here, but I already swatched the two lightest shades in the palette. This is the shade Tempera from the Modern Renaissance, and this is the white shade from the Wet n Wild palette. I'm now gonna be swatching the shade Raw Sienna from the Modern Renaissance right here. And I'm gonna be swatching shade number 10 from the Wet n Wild palette right next to that, because I feel like those are equivalent. Now I'm gonna be swatching shade Red Ochre from the Modern Renaissance palette. And now I'm gonna be swatching shade 7 from the Wet n Wild palette. Now I'm gonna be swatching shade Cypress Umber from the Modern Renaissance palette, as well as shade number 9 from the Wet n Wild palette. Now we're gonna be swatching shade Love Letter from the Modern Renaissance palette right here. Ooh, that pigment though. And I'm gonna be swatching shade number 8 from the Wet n Wild palette right next to it. And yeah, that is what those look like side by side. I'm gonna be taking these off and I'm gonna be showing you the next row of colors. Alright guys, so for this side, I'm first gonna go in with the shade Warm Taupe from the Modern Renaissance palette right here. And alongside that shade, I'm gonna go in with the shade number 1 from the Wet n Wild palette. And now I'm gonna go in with the shade Real Gar from the Modern Renaissance. And now I'm gonna go in with the shade number 6 from the Wet n Wild palette. And now I'm gonna go in with the shade Primavera from the Modern Renaissance. And now I'm gonna go in with the shade number 3 from the Wet n Wild palette. And now I'm gonna go in with the shade Buon Fresco from the Modern Renaissance. And now I'm gonna go in with the shade number 4 from the Wet n Wild palette. As you can tell, the Modern Renaissance is way more pigmented than the Wet n Wild one. And now we're gonna go in with the last shade that we have on both palettes, and that is the shade Antique Bronze from the Modern Renaissance, and that would be shade number 5 from the Wet n Wild palette. And yeah guys, that is pretty much what the swatches look like side by side from both palettes. Okay guys, so that was the swatches. As you guys saw, I feel like most of the shades were very similar, both in pigmentation and color and the way they felt. And now that I showed you guys on up close, I told you guys the price, I showed you the packaging and the swatches and how they swatch side by side, let's get into the application part of this video where you will see how I create this eye look and how the eyeshadows perform with a brush. So yeah, let's get into the application part of this video. Well, hello guys, so to start off the application part of this video, I'm gonna start off by priming my eyes, and I'm gonna be using the Smashbox 24-hour Photofinish shadow primer and some Tarte Shape Tape concealer. I'm gonna start off by putting just one dot of concealer right here, one here, one here. And now I'm just gonna grab a tiny bit of the shadow primer and I'm gonna put it right there. I don't put too much, but just enough to cover my whole lid. And now I'm gonna go in with my Sigma P88 and I'm gonna blend those two together. The reason why I'm just priming on camera and I usually don't is because I really want to show you that I do prime both my eyes the same, just in case we have any difference by the end of the day. I just want to let you know that I primed both eyes and that both eyes were prepped equally. I'm just gonna blend out the same primer with my Sigma 3D HD sponge. Now I'm just gonna set that eye primer with some of the Patrick Star powder with MAC and my Sigma F64. I always set my primer, so that is why I'm setting it today. Okay, so now my eyes are primed and set, and we're gonna start off with the eyeshadow, and I'm gonna be doing my right eye using the Wet n Wild palette, and I'm gonna be doing my left eye using the Modern Renaissance palette. And I'm first gonna go in with my Morphe M504 and the bottom transition shade from the Wet n Wild palette, this one right here. I'm gonna top off the excess of my brush, and I'm just gonna put that on my crease. Right off the bat, it is pigmented and it builds up nicely. It is blending very nicely as well. It is not being patchy. And I'm going in windshield wiper motions on my inner third of the eye, and when I get to the outer corner of the eye, I go in more circular motions. That was literally 30 seconds and it is blending up very nicely. I'm just gonna build it up a little bit right here. I feel like this shade is the equivalent of Raw Sienna in the Modern Renaissance palette, and that is what it is looking like. I literally blended it for like 30 seconds and it is already pretty blended and very nice. So I am liking this shade. I do have to show you guys, I did have a little bit of kickback, but as you can tell, nothing exaggerated. I feel like the Modern Renaissance palette has a little bit more kickback in the shade Raw Sienna than this Wet n Wild palette on this transition shade. I don't really get bothered by kickback because I feel like if the shadows blend and if the shadows are pigmented, the kickback doesn't really bother me. So now I'm gonna go in with that Morphe M504. I cleaned off the shade from the Wet n Wild palette because I really do not want them to mix. And now that my brush has absolutely no product on it, I'm gonna go in with the shade Raw Sienna from the Modern Renaissance palette. Can you guys tell a difference? I can't. I feel like they're both the exact same color. Whoa. I do feel like this Raw Sienna is blending a little bit faster than the Wet n Wild one, but as you saw, the Wet n Wild one wasn't bad. But like, can you guys even tell a difference in the color? It's like literally the exact same color. That's crazy to me. So now I'm gonna go in with my Sigma E38 and this shade right here from the Wet n Wild palette, which I feel like it's the equivalent of the color Red Ochre from the Modern Renaissance palette. So I'm just gonna tap into that. As you can tell, there is quite a bit of kickback with this shade in this palette. It is very similar to the kickback on the Modern Renaissance palette though. And I'm just gonna place it right on the socket of my crease. And I'm gonna blend it as I place it because that's usually how I do my eyeshadow. That's pigmented though, and it is blending very nicely into that first transition shade we just placed. It is not looking patchy, it is not breaking up, it is not falling on my face either. It is also blending very fast. Okay guys, so as you can tell, that blended very nicely. So now I just cleaned off that Sigma brush so that it doesn't have any product on it. And I'm gonna go in with the shade Red Ochre from the Modern Renaissance palette. I'm just gonna put this on the socket of my crease and I'm blending it as I place it like I did with the other eye. I'm gonna say that this is like the same story as the first shade. As you can tell, it is blending very nicely, but I do have to say the Modern Renaissance palette, it is blending a little bit faster, and I feel like it is building up a little bit faster as well. So now I'm gonna go in with my Sephora number 16 Dome Brush, and this shade right here from this Wet n Wild palette. I feel like this is the equivalent to the shade Cypress Umber from the Modern Renaissance. So I'm just gonna grab this with the brush. This shade does have a little bit less kickback than the previous shade we used, so that is good. And I'm gonna put this on the outer corner. I'm just gonna pack it. Ooh, that's pigmented. That is definitely very, very pigmented. I was not expecting this dark shade to be this pigmented. I did have some fallout on my face from that shade, but it is nothing exaggerated. That usually happens with my Modern Renaissance palette as well. I feel like so far, these palettes are dupes. I was not expecting this. Now I'm gonna go in with my Morphe M433 with no additional product, and I'm just gonna blend out this right here. And now I'm gonna clean off my Sephora number 16 brush, and I'm gonna go in with the shade Cypress Umber from the Modern Renaissance palette. I'm gonna pack it on the outer corner. Like, I feel like the only difference so far is that it takes you less time to blend the eyeshadows and to build them up with the Modern Renaissance palette as opposed to the Wet n Wild palette. Now I'm just gonna go in with my Morphe M433 and blending the edges like we did with the other eye. Alright guys, so far I feel like both of these palettes are performing very similarly. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go in with my Smashbox shader brush, and I'm gonna go in with this shimmery shade right here, which I feel like it is the equivalent to Primavera on the Modern Renaissance palette. I'm gonna pack it on the brush like so, and I do have to say this one didn't have any kickback on the pan, which is really, really nice. And now I'm just gonna put it right there. I do have to say, this shade is very dusty when it is placed on the eye. Like, as you can tell, I don't feel like it looks shimmery enough. Like, I don't know, it is not really impressing me. And I feel like it kind of went everywhere. So I'm gonna go in with my Morphe M433 and I'm gonna blend this upper edge right here. Yeah, guys, like, as you can tell, I feel like that shade completely disappeared. Like, it is not there. So far in this Wet n Wild palette, the matte shades are working very, very nicely. But I feel like that shimmer shade is a complete flop. I feel like if you wear a glitter glue or concealer under it, it would work very nicely, but so far with just a dry brush, it doesn't work. So now I'm gonna be using the shade Primavera from the Modern Renaissance palette with the same brush after cleaning it up, and I'm gonna use it dry as well because I want it to be a fair comparison. Like, as you can tell, that is such a statement and it is so shimmery. Like, just look at the difference. Like, look at this eye with Primavera and look at this eye with the Wet n Wild shade. I feel like Modern Renaissance definitely takes the cake when it comes to shimmer eyeshadows. I'm just blending that top edge with that same Morphe M433. And now I'm gonna go in with some of the shades Cypress Umber, and I'm just gonna blend Cypress Umber into the shimmer. And this is my Sephora number 16 brush. And now I'm gonna go back in with Primavera and I'm gonna blend it into Cypress Umber. So what I'm gonna do, since this shade didn't really show up on this eye, I'm gonna go in with my finger to see if it builds up with the finger. I do have to say, when I put my finger in the shadow, there is kickback in the pan. There wasn't any kickback with the brush though. And I'm just gonna put it right here. It definitely works better with your fingers, that is for sure. Going in with my Smashbox blending brush, blending the edges, but not too much because I do want it to show up. Now going in with that dark brown shade, doing the same thing I did with the other eye. And I do have to say, on this eye, right under my eyeshadow, there is more fallout on my face than on the Modern Renaissance side. As you can tell, these are both my eyes, and how they're looking at the moment, I do have to say the crease looks exactly the same. The main difference that I'm looking at right now is the lid shade. I feel like the shade Primavera, it is so much better than the Wet n Wild shimmer shade. I feel like the Wet n Wild shimmer shade is just not there, and it's just not wowing enough. For the brow bone, I'm gonna be using this matte white right here, which I feel like it is the equivalent to the shade Tempera, and I'm gonna grab that on my Sigma E21. That did brighten up my brow bone. As you can tell, it looks brighter and more blended into the crease than it used to before that shade, so that definitely worked. Now I'm gonna grab that same Sigma E21 in the shade Tempera from the Modern Renaissance palette, and I'm gonna highlight my brow bone with that shade. I feel like this one is definitely more pigmented. But I'm not really mad at the other one because it still did its job pretty much. Alright guys, so this is what the eyes are looking like right now. As you can tell, as I said before, the crease definitely looks very, very similar. And the main difference is just the shimmer shade in the eyes. But yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and put on some liner, lashes, and I'm gonna finish with the rest of my face, and I'll be back to do our lower lash line and to tell you guys my first impressions. Alright guys, so I already finished the rest of my makeup. I just have to do my lower lash line. So I'm gonna start off with the Marc Jacobs Highliner and Rococo. Putting this on the waterline. And now I'm gonna go in with the Morphe M432. It's a flat brush. And I'm gonna go in with this shade right here. And I'm gonna put that very close to the lash line. Kind of just gonna stamp it on. Now I'm gonna go in with the same Morphe M432. I'm gonna clean it off, and I'm gonna go in with the shade Red Ochre from the Modern Renaissance palette on the other eye. It's so weird. These look identical. They're building up the same with this brush. Now I'm gonna go in with the same Morphe M432. I'm gonna wipe it off, and I'm gonna go in with this shade right here, which I would say is definitely the equivalent to Love Letter from the Modern Renaissance palette. I wanna use as many of these shades as possible. And I'm gonna put this on the inner third, on the lower lash line, because you guys saw I only took that first shade like halfway in the lower lash line, so I'm just gonna bring this one all the way in. Now wiping it off and using Love Letter from the Modern Renaissance. And now, I know that that is not blended yet. I'm gonna go in with my Sigma 834, and I'm gonna go in with this shade right here, which I feel is very similar to Real Gar. I'm just gonna tap it off my 834, and I'm gonna blend out these reds. Now I cleaned off the brush, and I'm gonna go in with the shade Real Gar with the same Sigma 834, and I'm gonna blend out the reds on this side. Alright guys, so now for the inner corner, I really don't want to do Primavera because I have that on my lid. So I'm just gonna use some of the highlighter I used on my face, and that was the Carli Bybel Deluxe Edition Palette Highlighter. This one right here from the palette. So I'm gonna take that on my Sigma E21, and I'm just gonna put that on the very, very inner corner. I cannot go out without an inner corner highlight, like no way. And now I'm gonna go in with some Benefit BADGal Bang Mascara on the lower lashes, and we'll be done with the eyes. And yeah guys, that is it for the eyes. Alright guys, so I'm just gonna give you guys a quick first impressions on these products. I do have to say, I love both of these palettes. I feel like they both blended amazingly. They both build it up very nicely, and I feel like the color selection in both of them is amazing. I mean, of course, they have like the same colors. Like look at them side by side. They look exactly the same, but in a different setup. Are they dupes? I feel like in colors, they're definitely dupes. The Wet n Wild palette doesn't have some shades that are in the Modern Renaissance palette. For example, I feel like they don't have Venetian Red or Vermeer or Golden Ochre, but besides those three, I feel like they have all of the other ones. Oh, and also Burnt Orange. There's no Burnt Orange here. So you do get 4 more shades in the Modern Renaissance palette that you do not get on this one. However, as you can tell on my eyes right now, it does not look like I am wearing 2 different palettes on each side of my face. Like as you can tell, this is the Wet n Wild side, this is the Modern Renaissance side. I do have to say the Wet n Wild shimmer eyeshadow did transfer up onto my crease, and that is not going on in the Modern Renaissance side, so that is one thing that I am already noticing. But blending wise, I feel like they both blended amazingly. The kickback on the pan on each of the palettes was very, very similar. I feel like the darker the shade, the more kickback you have, and none of the shimmer shades had any kickback. I do have to say, I do like the shimmer shades on the Modern Renaissance palette a lot better. They're way creamier, they're more pigmented, they don't transfer up on the crease. I feel like on this Wet n Wild palette, it was kind of chalky when I used it on my finger, and although it didn't have kickback with the brush, it didn't really build on the eye well. Like it didn't really show up with a brush. I had to use my finger, and I would say that you can solve that using a glitter glue. You know, I really wasn't expecting the Wet n Wild palette to be that good. I thought it was gonna be a little bit more blotchy because it is very inexpensive, but I was so wrong. I do have to say the Modern Renaissance palette does blend a little bit faster, and it builds up a little bit faster as well. But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna do a little word test. Right now it is 4:40 in the afternoon, so it is kind of late, but I'll be back in around 6 to 7 hours to show you guys if the eyeshadows fall on my face, if they fade away, and I will tell you guys my final thoughts then. But first impressions, these are dupes and I like them both, so I'll see you in a little bit. Well, hello guys, so right now it is 12:04 a.m. as you can tell right there. So it has been almost 8 hours since I put on my eyeshadow, and I do have to say I really like it. None of these sides have faded, and I've only had a little bit of transfer of the gold eyeshadow on the Wet n Wild side and just a tiny bit as well on the Modern Renaissance side, just from my lid to my crease. But besides that, I feel like they both still look very pigmented and they didn't really wear off. And even the shimmer shades, like you can still tell they are still there. Pretty much I do like both of these palettes. I feel like they're both very good. I do have to say with the Modern Renaissance, it will blend a little bit faster, it will build up a little bit faster, and the shimmer shades are better. I would definitely say if you cannot afford the Modern Renaissance palettes by Anastasia, you should definitely try this one, because it is a definite dupe and you can get almost the exact same looks that you can with the Modern Renaissance, but for a lot less money. And the shadows blend, they are very pigmented, they are very nice, they last on the eye. And I feel like if you really want to fix the problem with the shimmer shades, you can always use a glitter glue or just apply it with your fingers like I did, as opposed to with a brush. But I do have to say with the Modern Renaissance, the nice thing about it is that you do get a brush, you get a mirror, you do get a little bit more shades. So those are pretty much the only things that the Modern Renaissance has that the Wet n Wild one does not have. But I don't know, I feel like they're both still worth it, because the Modern Renaissance is one of my favorite palettes ever, and it is just such a staple. I've had it for a year, and as you can tell, I still haven't hit pan on any of the shades, so this will last you a very long time. I feel like it will be the same thing with this one, because you are getting 10 eyeshadows, the pan size is very nice, and the colors that you would use the most, which are the transition shades, you do get more product, which would be shades 10 and 1. So those are pretty much the pros and cons of these palettes. Also, I feel like they both have the same amount of kickback in the pan when you put your brush in, so that is the same on both of them. But yeah, that is pretty much it for this video. I feel like they're both approved. I love the Modern Renaissance, I love the Wet n Wild one, and they're definite dupes. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel before you leave. And yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on my next one. Bye guys.